where people who want to evolve the system can write it down in a very careful way. So in Bitcoin's case, it was a Bitcoin improvement proposal. On Ethereum, it's the Ethereum improvement proposal. And for us, it's the CIP, the Cardano improvement proposal. But it's just a structured way of discussing how you wish to change. Then there's a question of, do you want to do this implicitly or explicitly? In the case of Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's an implicit system. So there's no on-chain voting. There's no like 5 people said this and 4 people said this, so we do this. In the case of Cardano, we're actually explicitly inviting this. This is one of the biggest differentiators between Cardano, Polkadot, EOS, and these other things, is that we're really serious about governance to the extent that we're actually doing foundational research in e-voting. We're building new voting systems. We're exploring preference voting and quadratic voting. And the long and the short is that we want more and more people to participate in voting for things. And you have to start somewhere. So our hypothesis is we can bootstrap the system with the treasury system. So in Cardano, some of the inflation goes to the block producers, just like any other cryptocurrency, but some goes into a decentralized treasury. She now has over $1 billion of ADA in it. So it's a lot of money. And that treasury is not under my control or the foundation's control. It's actually controlled by the community as a whole through a program called Catalyst. And so all these people can come together, they can submit spending ballots, and other people who hold ADA can vote to approve that. What's nice about it is you have a growth engine to improve two axes. One is absolute participation. So increase the amount of people who hold ADA participating, so the absolute number of people participating. And the other is meaningful participation, so the depth of participation. Did you just show up and vote? Or did you spend hours debating things on IdeaScale, the innovation management platform, interacting with the funding proposal, going back and forth? And there's dozens of little things like that. Now, my hypothesis is if you run this with enough iterations, eventually you get to a certain critical mass, like over 50% absolute participation and a high level of meaningful participation, where you can move beyond funding and you can start actually having meaningful questions about protocol design and improvement proposals and so forth. And then what you can do is you can roll out new voting systems and new social structures, and you can let them start voting on training wheels like system parameters, like, for example, the minimum transaction fee or that K parameter for the amount of stake pools or these types of things. Okay? Then they build enough competency there, and they move up a next level, and they actually start talking about hard forks using the update system, the hard fork combinator system. See, so that's how you...
Voting on a hard fork?
Voting on a hard fork. You can't do it unless your social dynamics are right and your voting system is right. And by the way, you also need to write a constitution around the same time, because not all hard forks are created equally. The kinds of things that would add support for a new cryptographic primitive are distinctly different from the kinds of things that would change your monetary policy of the system.
So the Constitution would be written, and maybe you can comment on what is the innovation management
it's a company.
system.
So we partnered with a company called IdeaScale, and they run a kind of a side platform. So people who are interested, that's kind of our version of a forum. They sign up, and there's special tools in that platform for discussions that are productive. So they don't descend into kind of like trolley Reddit style conversations, but they're much more focused around how is your product building out. And by the way, we're going to add more infrastructure over time. In fact, our chief of staff, Tamara Hassan, she's working on setting up an incubator and accelerator, and we have lots of cool partners we've talked with in that space. And it's the same concept. Your idea comes in, what enters the system should not be what gets approved on the other side. It should go through some sort of gauntlet, some sort of crucible where you iterate your way through, and there's all kinds of optimizations and upgrades and evolutions and combinations and destructions that occur. And then by the time you get to the other side, either the idea just dies on the vine because it was a bad idea, or it's a significantly stronger, far more fundable thing, and potentially even gets attached with accountability. So you don't just fund the idea, you actually fund the auditor at the same time who actually holds the person accountable, because the blockchain is not a real company. It's an ethereal thing. You need a counterparty to hold someone accountable who's real for that type of stuff and that type of funding. So that's what we're doing this year. It's like we have a whole team of people, partners like Governance Live and IdeaScale, and papers we've written, and about 40,000 people regularly participating in this. So it's a huge social experiment. And we're learning an enormous amount. And then our goal is by the end of the year to have a meaningful percentage of the entire Cardano population inside of it, like 40, 50%. Then once you're at that threshold, now you have democratic majority of the entire system. And you can have a real conversation about, okay, how do we write a constitution for this type of a system?
And sorry to interrupt, but so the Constitution, people still argue about it because natural language, much like poetry, lends itself to multiple interpretations. Is it possible to formalize some of these ideas reduce the ambiguity.
Everything's old is new again. We were talking about Lojban back in the day, right? So there's definitely formal languages you can use to express these things. That's why I'm so interested in things like Idris and Koch and Agda and theorem proving, because that's exactly what you're attempting to do, is to express some concept or desire or construction in a language that's machine understandable and manipulatable. In particular, how does a system know its own design? So what is the reference of a cryptocurrency? Usually it's a canonical code base, like, here's Bitcoin Core, and C++ code that is the canonical code base. But actually that's not right. You should have specifications, blueprints that are implementation agnostic as your canonical code base. And can your system know those specifications, understand those specifications, and can your change management system be for that? And then can you provide a proof that your client is bisimilar to that specification? So that's 10 years in the future, but that's where you would go with that kind of a concept.
But you're tending towards the formalism.
Eventually, but that's not necessary for the system in the short term. It's good enough just to have anoint a winner and say the Haskell client is that, and then what you basically do is you vote on a SIP, and then once it's approved, then you go and implement that, and there's some mechanism to trigger the update system to update the reference client.
Do you have an example of a SIP, a Cardano improvement proposal?
Like the current benefit pledge, SIP 007. So the
007.
Yeah, everybody loves that.
Yeah,
I got to change my luggage code now, Lex.
What is that?
So basically, it just has to do with the pledge. So pledge is a certain amount of ADA that a stake pool operator will set aside and connect to his pool in order to be listed in the registry. And actually, it's connected to how much income you make as a pool operator. So if you set it too high, you have a consolidation and you have lots of pools. If you set it too low, what will happen is larger pools will tend to fragment and actually run multiple instances of themselves. And so there's this delicate parameter that you have to tweak. And so we have a formula for it in our formal specification that's quite involved. And so one of the community members came and said, well, I think we can massively simplify this design and actually get a better result for smaller stake pool operators. And so it's SIP 007. And there's actually a lot of conversation and people are thinking about it. And it's just stunning for me because to understand how to write a SIP like this, you actually have to read like 100 pages of mathematical prose in the formal specification. So the guys who wrote it, I was like, fuck yeah, this is great. But that's an example of a SIP. But that's one thing, but it can be as big as, hey, I want to add like quantum resistance to the system. And here's how you do that, like quantum VRF, and I want to put XMSS and all this other stuff. So there's a lot you can do, and you can do it you can do it indirectly or implicitly, where there's some social process outside of the system where you eventually approve a SIP, or you can do it explicitly where you directly vote, or some representative democracy, some group of representatives directly votes, and then once you've decided, it's there. The Constitution is necessary because you need to know the decision threshold. Mm-hmm. Is it supermajority or majority? And also the voting process. Like a lot of policy experts believe that if Brexit was a multi-stage vote, it would have never passed. Because what people would have done the initial stage and all the horrors of Brexit would have been broadcast to society, and then there would have been some reluctance and buyer's remorse on it, and then the second round would have failed or something like that. But because it was just a singular event, it's like they passed it. Now British are all passive aggressive about it. Like, oh, sign. Very well, we shall remove from Europe. And so your voting system has a lot to do with, the outcome you get. The other thing is, what type of voting? Is it just an absolute or is it preference voting? Like, so, you pick your favorite SIP, follow your second favorite SIP or something like that. So Condorcet or Borda are two examples of systems.
Are you a fan of those, like the ranked choice voting?
I love them so much, especially for political diversity, because this whole concept of throwing your vote away. If it's Alice or Bob, you're always going to get and South Park did it best, right? The giant the
turd.
Yeah, you know the one.
Turd versus I forget what else. Douche versus turd.
Douche versus turd. South Park. So if it's ranked order, or preference voting, you never have that situation because you always pick your favorite, and you get a lot more diversity on the ballot. But then you have Arrow's paradox, and all these other things that come up. So there's no perfect system, and really you have to be comfortable with governance in a game of inches. And you start by some guiding principles. And the guiding principles is more is better, and productive interactions are better than destructive interactions. And you have to be able to quantify those things. As long as you have an engine that allows you to grow in those directions, then you have a lot more people along for the ride when you actually start talking about these bigger and bigger things. The other challenge was that we had to decentralize development of the protocol and the brain of the protocol. Mm-hmm. We have fully decentralized the brain of the protocol. The peer review academic process means that there's now an academic incentive for graduate students, postdocs, and professors to spend enormous amounts of time writing papers in our ecosystem because they want tenure. They want to, and we showed that you can get it. There's been a lot of people who've gotten great academic careers from working with us. So keep adding to that pile of 105 papers. This is great. And it doesn't need Charles Hoskinson. It doesn't need IOHK funding or anything like that to run. We're already seeing unfunded derivative work from people who are completely disconnected from us writing papers about stuff in our ecosystem. So just continue to develop that, but that's looking good. Decentralized development, we're working on that as well. Our goal is sometime in the next few years to make sure there's at least 3 independent clients, so 3 completely independent dev teams and code bases, and also to get a separation of the commercial clients from the reference code and turn the reference code into like a formal specification, a formal blueprint, and then have that change management be completely decentralized. The core developers are actually voted on, and the SIP process is used to change that, and then some way of proving that your client follows the specification as use of the protocol.
Is there, beyond the Cardano ecosystem, these ideas of distributed governance, do you see ways it could revolutionize politics, our governments?
Oh, yeah. Like the Ethiopia deal, for example, we have 5 million people that we brought in with the DID system there. That's going to follow them throughout their whole life. Right now, they're high school students. But when they're in their 20s, 30s, they're going to want to use that for e-voting and for payments and so forth.
Can you describe the Ethiopia project? Because that's fascinating.
Yeah, so we spent 4 years in Ethiopia. I went there in 2017 and shook a lot of hands, kissed a lot of babies. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll have it all done in 6 months. Everything is a lot of fun there, but it takes a little bit longer than you'd think to get anything done. And that's okay. I really love Ethiopia. It's a beautiful country. So we spent 4 years. We trained a whole cohort of developers, and then we started a relationship with the Ministry of Education, and they care a lot about proper credentials. One of the biggest problems they have is when someone graduates, it's really hard for them to prove the quality of the credentials that they have, and it's really hard for them to prove the knowledge that they have. So if you want to be an ICT outsourcer, or how does somebody know that this is a real programmer, or how does somebody really know that this is a real doctor, or whatever the hell you're outsourcing? So they said, can you come and build a digital identity system for credentials? So every student in the country at some point will get a DID, a decentralized identifier, and then you can prove all sorts of things about them, like GPA or what particular diploma they hold or blah, blah, blah. And then the beautiful thing is the way we designed it is it's extensible to include payments, extensible to include proofs about themselves, like are you over the age of 21, that kind of stuff. And then eventually it can be used to link into a cryptocurrency system. In this case, we built it for Cardano. So Atala Prism is the framework we're using for it. Every student will get one. And then those students will be able to use those credentials in the Cardano ecosystem, eventually for DeFi, like lending and so forth. So it's the largest blockchain deal of its kind, and it probably will grow to 20 million people over the next 24 months. The other beautiful thing about Ethiopia that people don't know is the prime minister is a cryptographer. He's in his 40s, 50s, he's a young guy, and he can actually read the papers we write.
Wow.
And so he's a really bright guy, and he's written this beautiful agenda called Digital Ethiopia 2025. And one of his things in the agenda is digital identity. He wants every person in the country to have a digital identity by 2025, and he wants to implement an e-voting system at some point for that. So when you ask about governance, all these governance tools that we're constructing for Cardano are completely reusable for a nation state. A company, and by the way, if you create a Cardano application, will eventually be reusable for you. Because if you have a DeFi protocol, you need a voting system. Why the fuck do you have to re-implement that? Native multi-asset, anything that works on ADA works with a native multi-asset. You can use our voting system for your asset. So you get a government in a box that you can parameterize any way you want. And similarly, when a government does something with Cardano, not only do they get all this amazing infrastructure, but wait, there's more. They actually get this amazing voting system that they can use for small or large-scale decisions that they want to do. On the U.S. side, we're thinking about trying to roll something like this out in the state of Wyoming. There's been tons of laws that are passed. It's a very friendly crypto place. At the very least, it'd be fun to see if we can do the Republican-Democrat primaries with preference voting and voter registration this way,
Nice.
and do it completely online with an e-voting system. So, that's something we'll be pursuing in 2022.
You think there's some openness to that?
Yeah. That's the one good thing about the craziness of Trump. He's made like half of America think the election system is completely irreparably broken. So, you walk in, it's like, we're going to go kill Dominion. And they're like, yay, that's great. Let's go do that. Whether you believe that or not, it created a market opportunity, created a lack of faith and credibility in the system.
To improve the
Exactly.
What do you think about El Salvador becoming the first country to approve a cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in this case, as legal currency? And where's this trend going? First of all, this event, if you mentioned the Bitcoin conference, the Bitcoin folks believe that this is a monumental event. Do you think this is a start of something new?
Well, they're both right, the critics and the pro people. So the critics are saying this is a nothing burger and it's just a publicity event for El Salvador. And then the people say this is the most monumental event. They may actually be right because there's reciprocal agreements. When a country issues a currency, other countries honor that usually, and it trades on forex exchanges. So if like Bitcoin becomes a recognized currency of a country, then it may be the case that the United States and the European Union and others can't actually stop them from trading on forex exchanges and being treated as a currency from a regulatory perspective. So it was like a really clever backdoor into the League of Nations. And actually, we had this crazy harebrained idea years ago. We were down in Mexico at the Satoshi Roundtable, and we're like, hey, let's go buy a country. Let's go to Tuvalu and get them to do something with cryptocurrency, because they sell everything in Tuvalu, like the .tv extension and their fishing rights, and Taiwan pays them money to recognize them and so forth. So I'm like, man, maybe we can convince Tuvalu to do something with crypto. That didn't work out so well. But now El Salvador is actually playing the game, and that's a real country. It's got like 5 million people and so forth. So we know the president's brother, and we've had some conversations there. So maybe we'll go, in the next few months and see what's going on there and do a state visit and talk to the president. But it's an interesting development, and it's one of those things that it can't quite be ignored because a nation state's doing it. On the other hand, you have to manage expectations. Is the central bank taking a position in Bitcoin? Are they actually switching over to a cryptocurrency as their unit of account? Are they now getting off of BIS and they're all using the settlement rails of central banks? Are they actually blockchaining the entire country and they have some broad, ambitious agenda to go and do all that? That remains to be seen. And so it really is a commitment there. The other thing is that if you're autocratic, these systems are not so good for you, because the minute you adopt these types of systems, you're pushing a lot of power to the edges. So there's a world of difference between optics and actual commitment. And actual commitment is I'm prepared to accept the consequences that the state is going to lose a lot of power along the way. And the problem is, it's not clear to me if some of these politicians who are pro-blockchain, and I'm not making a statement of El Salvador in particular, I'm just saying in general, are fully aware of that reality. A lot of them seem to think that somehow they can contain their blockchain genie in the bottle and blockchain their whole country, but stay president for life. That doesn't work. Once they have that power, they're gone.
So do you think once they realize that this is one of the failure cases, one of the things that people are concerned about is governments banning cryptocurrency?
Well, that's the China case, right? They started realizing this was a legitimate threat to capital controls and to the autocratic system that they've constructed there. And then suddenly China is starting to build its own People's Bank of China blockchain, and Bitcoin is now the redheaded stepchild. They didn't really care too much because it was great for corruption. You could evade capital controls, and so all the well-connected people, there's, oh yeah, Bitcoin's bad, but then they'd have Bitcoin of their own and they could use it to send money around. But now the government's gotten very serious about it. They're just saying like, okay, we want to control and dominate this whole thing, and it's a threat to our plan for the digital yuan to become the world standard to displace the dollar.
But so the moment you have El Salvador and just more and more countries, say there'll be a country in Europe, for example,
right,
that accepts Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, Cardano, the idea is it would put a lot of pressure on you. So there'll be like this kind of ripple effect,
right,
that and then the individual governments won't be able to help, and eventually there'll be a superpower like, I don't know, Russia or the United States and or, I don't know, Canada. So do you see that sort of an inevitable trend where cryptocurrency takes over the world as a store of value and as a method of payments?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you can do just so much more with programmable finance. Transactions in general have 5 properties. You have the asset that runs on the rail. That's what we always think about. And you can transact that, and then you have the identity, and you transact that either like 1-to-1, 1-to-many, many-to-1, or many-to-many. And then you have metadata. So that's the story of the transactions, like where did it take place, these types of things. And then you have the contractual relationship. So that's the smart contract component. And then you embed that within regulation. So transactions always live within jurisdictions. This is relevant to the conversation, will digital currencies take over? Because those things are right now done separately in a very fragmented and fractured way, and they're not completely globalized. And so it's super expensive to hoist up this entire system and automate things like compliance. It's usually a huge part of every bank's balance sheet. So when you look at the concept of a digital currency, you're saying all 5 of those things are programmable. And so they could be like library driven. You say, oh, I want to be in compliance with Eritrea. Okay, pull up the Eritrean library. Now you are. It's built into the transaction. Previously, it's like, go hire some lawyers and go figure out the entire code and translate some things and rah, rah, rah. And it's crazy. Just the orders of magnitude efficiency gains that you get and the increased liquidity you get and the fact that you can now represent all assets with a universal way, that financial stem cell, there's an inevitability to the victory of our industry. The challenge is, how do we deal with this with the squabbling of superpowers? China wants to be the new world standard, America wants to preserve that, and the rest of the world is trying to figure out how do we create something that's a bit more fair and balanced. And so crypto comes in, and it potentially is both an ally and a competitor to those desires. Because if you do too much crypto, you don't need a nation state anymore. If you do too little crypto, well, it's China or America. So what's that sweet spot?
Do you hope that in the process of cryptocurrency pushing power to the edges, to the people, that we would be able to alleviate some of the suffering in the world caused by centralized power and the abuses of power, and corruption, all those kinds of things?
100%. I made a very angry video months ago. I make angry videos. I shouldn't drink, Lex. I really should.
Maybe you should drink more.
Yeah, I know, right? It depends on who you ask. I made a video a little while. I said, our industry is an industry of frustration. It exists because we weren't the industry that charged 85% interest to the poorest people in the world for loans. We weren't the industry that charged 15% to move money for a maid sending money home to mom in Manila. We weren't the industry that laundered hundreds of billions of dollars of drug money and funded arms dealers in Africa and all these things, or permitted oil for food to exist and so forth. And the people who did these things aren't in jail. They're rich. They're billionaires. They fly private jets. So our industry is the antidote to these types of things. We say, guys, we want a system that's fair. That's it. And we want everybody to be treated equally. That doesn't mean everybody's going to win. It doesn't mean that when you lose, somebody's going to come on a white horse and bail you out. You're going to have winners and losers, but it's fair. That's all we want. That's all we've ever wanted. There's no coincidence that Bitcoin was created right around the same time as the 2008 financial crisis. It's not like these were just unrelated events. They're highly correlated to each other, okay? I'd say perhaps even causal. Go figure. And everything we've done as an industry from that moment to today and beyond has been about that endless, relentless desire to make things a little bit less corrupt, a little bit less nepotistic, and a bit more open. And it's gotten so insane that you have these things in Wyoming called speedy banks, where you're full reserve banks. They have 100% of their balance sheet is accounted for. They don't lend. And then you have the people in the banking community saying, well, those are a risk to banking. We're scared that these speedy banks are going to default. Mm-hmm. It's like, what world are you living in? You have fractional reserves, sometimes like 2% assets on the balance sheet. And then you're worried that the guys who actually have $1 for every dollar they say they have are the ones that are going to collapse. Mm-hmm. It's like the 1984 level doublespeak when you see the system and negative interest rates and all these other things. And so I absolutely believe the direction and course of this industry is to make things more honest and fair. And also, by its very existence, it exposes double standards, hypocrisy, and corruption. Just the fact that it's there. Because it's one thing to say that, well, it just can't be because of the nature of global finance. There's no way to do it otherwise. It's another thing to see it there as an example and say, well, that thing is doing it. Why can't you guys be this way? That's why I'm so passionate about Africa, because they don't like the systems they have, and everybody's really young. And they are going to throw all the systems out in the next 20 years, and they're going to replace them with something else. If we get this stuff into Africa, 1.2 billion people will be living in a considerably better system than the rest of the world. And then everybody else will look at that and say, why the hell are those guys so rich? Why are those guys making the money? Why are those guys doing so well? And it's not satisfying to hear, well, that's, Africa is just better. No one's going to say that. They're going to say, okay, yeah, it's nepotism and corruption and, lack of transparency and these types of things. So I think absolutely it has the potential to improve the human condition, but humans have to get out of the way. Humans have ingrained in themselves selfishness and a desire to maximize for themselves and their family and not think in systems. And so we have to evolve capitalism at the same time. And what I mean by that is right now, you're trying to maximize the amount of resources you get today. What we need to do is start thinking about how do we create future versions of ourselves in 2100 and create a resource for that time period. And then the name of the game is to maximize that or balance that with what you get in the short term. And then suddenly you're saying to yourself, well, if I'm doing things that are good for me today, but compromising then, I make less money. Mm-hmm. So capitalism as an engine is okay. The problem is it's misparameterized.
Right, almost like inject long-term incentives into the capitalist system.
Exactly, and cryptocurrency space is the only economic system where that's actually possible. Mm-hmm. You can create a tokenomics scheme where doing things that are beneficial for people you'll never meet because you're long dead actually makes you money today. You can't do that in a legacy financial system and so forth. So I think that's the real impact capital conversation that has to be had as you explore these things is you have to talk to people and say, look, it's not about communism or socialism versus capitalism. It's not about, hey, let's donate and save the world or try to be charity and make things better. It's all about how do you use the fact that we have a better toolkit to create a different system, a different incentive model where the default configuration of the system is long-term thinking. And the default consideration of the system is to get rid of all these negative externalities that marketplaces have and judge the success of society not by how the greatest of society are doing, but by how the least of society are doing. HDI, not GDP, this kind of thinking. And I think crypto can actually be the vanguard that kind of pushes us there. And the first countries to adopt that are going to be just significantly better places to live. And so the people who envy them will force the other countries to change.
That's right. It'll be a ripple effect. So when you wake up in the morning or as you sleep like a baby, wake up multiple times in the middle of the night, do you feel the burden of this kind of future that's in your hands, not to mess it up? Like, what is it, Big Lebowski? Her life is in your hands, dude.
Don't worry about them. They're nihilists, Donnie.
Do you feel the burden of because we're talking about all these 100+ papers and the academic beauty of the algorithms we're talking about, but then there's millions of human lives at stake here.
I mean, you always feel the burden, especially my own company. I mean, I have all these people work for me and, they eat because I pay them, right? So if I can't pay them, then that's my fault. Yeah, so you have to, as a leader, you always have to be cognizant that there's all these people who've signed up for your crazy vision, and you have to be larger than life. You always have to be good. You're not allowed to have a bad day. You're not allowed to feel like shit. You always have to show up. You always have to be pushing forward. And so that's a huge burden in many respects because there's Charles the person and then, Charles the CEO, and these are very different things in terms of expectations at the very least. And so it's heavy in that respect. That said, what gives you solace is that you're not in it alone. It's lonely, but you're not alone. You have so many amazing people around you that are willing to help and actually take some of that burden. And my life has gotten considerably better when I learned how to delegate and trust. And even if people screw up and fail, it's worth the risk because ultimately you're amplifying yourself. The other thing is that it's okay not to get all the way. You want to push there, but make sure whatever the hell you do, you leave something for somebody else to pick up and carry on. That's why we care so much about the publication process and open source code. We'll never file a patent in our entire history. Because whatever we do, it's yours as much as it is mine. And maybe I can only get you 70% of the way. And I'll plop over dead from a heart attack or get killed by an eagle or something like that. Maybe somebody brings the maybe somebody brings the Hast eagle back and it kills me. So it could happen. They're bringing the woolly mammoth back. Talk to George Church about that.
It's a good way to go.
Yeah, I know.
Either the eagle or the mammoth.
I'd rather be crushed by a mammoth because eagles actually fly you up and drop you.
So you won't die. It'll be a slow death, and they probably peck at you.
Exactly. You'd just be grievously wounded on the ground, and the eagle's like slowly devouring you. Yeah, don't go down that way. I've lost my train of thought.
The point is that you feel deeply grateful. There's a bunch of people around you, and then you give.
You delegate, and somebody fights the eagle, and other people takes care of that, and this, that, and the other. You just do the best you can. You're in the arena. You fight as hard as you can. You leave nothing. It's for home. You can put it all on the field, and then when you go home, you have pride in what you've done, and you know that you've at least made a slight difference. And, one person can make a huge difference. Look at Norman Borlaug. I mean, he just went around the whole world teaching people how to grow crops. He saved 1 billion lives over the course of his life. 1 billion people didn't starve to death because of one guy. It's amazing, the asymmetry and the returns on that type of a thing, just for the knowledge transfer of all things, and yet not a household name. So that's the other side of it, of the burdens. People always want something or something. So they say, oh, if I endure all these burdens, I should be given something. I entered into this space fully expecting that probably the most likely outcome was jail. That's what my dad told me and other people told me. And it was because it's like, look at where we came from. The Liberty Dollar, E-Gold, all these things. Anybody tries to innovate the monetary system, either end up like Gaddafi, or they end up in prison, or they end up like a nepotistic corrupt banker or something like that. And so, the financial regulations are not built for rapid innovation. They're not built for Bitcoin. There's a reason Satoshi was anonymous. It wasn't because, he enjoyed the anonymity. Because there was legitimate criminal risk for this type of activity. So the fact that I've gotten this far and I'm doing pretty good, that's a win. You take that. Life is good.
What does a productive day in the life of Charles Hoskinson look like? Now, we're getting to the details here. Diet, like fasting or not, maybe. Coffee, non-coffee, exercise, sleep, scheduling, like periods of deep work, programming, then the social media stuff that you do.
Right.
You clearly enjoy being on social media, and also live streaming, educating, inspiring the world, or getting drunk and ranting at the computer.
Well, first off, you do a wet year and a dry year. That's what prevents you from becoming an alcoholic. So unfortunately, the way that schedule worked, 2020 was my dry year. Like, I didn't drink the entire year. Not a single sip of alcohol. It was the worst.
On purpose?
Yeah. You do a dry year and then you do a wet year.
Oh, so this is one of your ideas about life, is you alternate.
Yeah, you have to alternate. Never do too much of any one thing.
Well, Churchill never alternated. He just kept drinking throughout his life. He did pretty good. just to push back against.
Yeah, him and Alfred North Whitehead. Although, didn't Churchill get kicked out as prime minister at some point?
So maybe he took
one
dry year.
Yeah, he was sober, happy, in shape Churchill. He would have led Britain for 30 fucking years. But, see, Lex?
Yeah.
That's why we can't have nice things.
Hunter S. Thompson. Maybe you're onto something.
Oh, it's really crazy if you go to Aspen and see the bar he used to go to. I actually met a waitress who knew him really well, and he'd go in there like 2-3 times a day. And she's like, yeah, he'd do cocaine right here on the table, and he'd come in with lots of pills and just put them all out on the table and be taking them at different hours, and they were all clearly illegal substances, but we just give him coffee or whatever he wanted. He's a great guy. But anyway, that's the day in the life of Charles. I fast. I try to do intermittent fasting, 16/8. The longest fast I ever did for a long-term fast was 2 weeks, which was just crazy.
Wow.
Oh, my God,
Can you take me through the journey of, like, philosophically what was going on in your mind?
Well, so normally when I do an extended fast, it's about 3-4 days, because that's the sweet spot before you start losing muscle mass and other things start happening. And there's people know so much more about this than I do, but I just feel pretty good. And you kind of get addicted to the fast high. You don't have to eat. You have no downtime. Yep. You're just going. Your energy never dips. And so I used to do like 3-5 days, maybe 3-4 was the sweet spot. But then after about a week, I was like, how long can I make this go? And so I started talking to some people. They said, well, Angus Barbary did 384 days. Of course, I'm not as fat as Angus. So I said, I can do 2 weeks. Yeah. So I just kept going and kept going and kept going and kept going. And right around the 2-week mark, I fainted for a little bit in a chair, and I was like, okay, maybe I should start eating again. But then I was legitimately worried about like refeeding syndrome and this stuff. Like, okay, how do I take care of that? So my brother's a doctor, and I called him and I said, hey, Willie, I haven't eaten in 2 weeks. How do I start eating again? And he's like, well, what?
Slowly.
Yeah. So in the usual routine, intermittent fasting, although I haven't been as good about it as I should be, and I used to work out, I don't do as much as that. The stress and the work-life balance has been horrible the last 24 months, and I've gained a lot of weight and all that stuff, but I'll fix that. But I do try a lot of things, like I use the Calm app and I do meditation. Recently, I started doing photobiomodulation. You ever heard of that?
No.
This crazy headset called a V-Light. You saw that picture of me with like the weird thing with the red lights on? It actually shoots lights into your brain. It's really cool stuff. But it improves blood flow, and actually there's some peer-reviewed studies that show that it does neurogenesis, so you actually generate new neurons and things like that. It's really cool stuff. So I do that, and it actually helps a lot. And it's every day's a little different.
Do you get a few hours of like alone time to work, to think?
Yeah, deep work is so important. There's even a book on that, like Deep Work.
Yeah, by Cal Newport.
Yeah, I think you interviewed him, didn't you?
Yeah. Everyone should listen to his podcast, Deep Questions. He's awesome. He's a mathematician, a theoretical computer scientist. So those guys really need their time alone to really think.
That's the one thing I deeply miss. When you're a CEO, you're the master of the 5-minute deal. You come in, you talk to people, you make a decision, you move on to the next thing, And I used to be used to like really deep focus. You'd sit down and think about something for 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours. And that's that. And I enjoyed it. It was just so beautiful to get lost into something and just go and go and go. And then you become a CEO, and it's like you never can go and go. You're lucky if you read a 4-page thing, because there's something else that comes up, you have to travel, you have to do that. So I've been trying lately to have, and actually our chief of staff recommended, like Fridays is do not disturb day. So it's for deep work, you don't have meetings, any of these things. And so far I have not committed to that, but everybody else in the organization has started to move there. But my hope is next month that I can actually get serious about that. The other time I'm lost in thought is I do a lot of float tanks. Have you ever done isolation tanks?
No, but I really want to.
It's one of the most amazing things you can do. You come out on the other side and all your stress worries, they're just gone. And you have so much productivity and clarity. If you combine that with daily naps, that's the way to go.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of naps. So what about the social media stuff and like you doing the live streams? Do you ever dread those? Are you energized by those? So because you're exceptionally good at communicating all the different kinds of ideas and being very transparent with the community, all those kinds of things.
I really enjoy the live streams. It's fun. It's never been a chore because it's for them. It's a chance for people in the community who've been loyal and they really love it to actually just be there, ask some questions, and I try to make it as entertaining as possible. And you have your trolls and you have your love, and it's actually nice to have a mixture of the two because sometimes you can beat down trolls just for fun, that kind of stuff. And it's grown to a cult following. I think there's like 40, 50,000 people, and it's almost like Fight Club in a certain respect. So I was in Vancouver years ago, and I was at Air Canada checking in, just about to fly back to Colorado, and I was getting this weird vibe from the guy that was checking me in. And then right after he takes my bag, he kind of leans over to me. He's like, "I love Ada." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, I watch your live streams." And then I was flying into London. I was at London Heathrow Airport, and the passport control guy was there, and I was just about to take my passport out, and he says, "Welcome to London, Mr. Hoskinson." I was like, "Oh God, am I going to jail in London? Why does the border patrol guy know who I am? This is a bad deal for me." And it turned out he watched my live streams, and so there's a lot of that and that's so much fun. In fact, here in Austin, I was at a Mexican restaurant just down close to this place. And while eating there, 2 different people recognized me, and I took a picture with one of them. And again, they watched the live streams. So that's...
Well, if it's anything like Fight Club, you have to wonder if some of those people or all of them are just figments of your imagination.
Right. I would... I don't have an answer for that, Lex.
I could be a figment of your imagination, which just proves that.
Yeah, but honestly, if I was capable of that level of delusion, why the hell don't I look like Brad Pitt?
Good point. Okay, so... on this topic, let me ask you about mushrooms. You're interested in mushrooms, growing mushrooms. Mm-hmm. I believe you are also interested in the mind-expanding capabilities of psychedelics. At least you mentioned kind of the interesting place where your interest in non-psychedelic mushrooms might go. Can you explain the nature of your interest in mushrooms? Is it personal? Is it business? Is it both?
Well, it's a little bit of everything. It's just an underexplored area of science and botany that ought to be explored because there's so much cool, interesting stuff there. Mushrooms do so much. Like they have these things called cordyceps, and they are like a zombie fungus that infects insects, takes them over, and then it will have them kind of get to other insects and then burst out of their head like an alien and spray spores on them and repeat the process. I mean, they even made a damn game about this, The Last of Us or something like that. And it's a real thing. Like you can Google it and see like these dead ants with these fungal staph coming out of them. And it's like, holy God, this is crazy. And in the same topic, you go all the way to lion's mane, and it could actually help treat Alzheimer's and treat depression and Parkinson's and regrow nerves and so forth. Other things, they've shown some effectiveness against COVID. You know, it's just so crazy, the diversity in the mushroom kingdom of the medicinal applications, the pesticide applications. You can use it a lot to kind of save hay and trees. There's a lot of things you can do to combat all kinds of invasive species. And it's true, there's a lot of cool stuff with psychedelic mushrooms. And there's a great book from Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind, where he was really the first journalist in a long time to go and Roland Griffiths work his way through the Johns Hopkins studies. But the long and short for me when I read that book, like, okay, mind expansion is great, but look at the effectiveness of psychedelics, psilocybe mushrooms with SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, for the treatment of depression. They showed in the Johns Hopkins studies that they're equal or better in effectiveness in many cases.
Yes, fascinating.
For the treatment of depression than a drug that you have to take forever. And this is just one or two treatments, and then you desist from it. That's a miracle, because there's so many people suffer from severe depression, and it's a lifetime ailment. And the fact that we have something in the toolbox that we've underexplored is a very powerful thing. The other thing was end-of-life issues. A lot of people get cancer. I've lost people in the family from cancer. And it's so hard those last 2-3 months, because they kind of like have this, they're in horrific pain. They're trying to find meaning and why is this happening to me? And if you can just give them a substance that on the other side of it, there's a good chance they can come to peace with everything and die with a lot more dignity and happiness, that alone justifies an enormous amount of study. And the fact that these things are super cheap and they grow pretty much anywhere, it's pretty cool. Now, on the commercial side, you can make a lot of money from mushrooms. I'm working with a company called Farmbox Foods, and it's one of they do both vertical hydroponic farming. They also do mushroom, and they put these amazing labs and shipping containers that are kind of like controlled environments. And you grow 400 pounds of gourmet mushrooms a single week off of that, and your margins can be up to 30% per year. If you're just selling them for food consumption, if you're doing supplements, they can be even higher than that. So it just kind of made sense from a diversification of assets to say, hey, let's do some stuff in hydroponics and aquaponics and in mushrooms. But the more I do, the more I learn that community, just the cooler that community is. Like I went to this beautiful mushroom festival in Cave Springs down in Georgia, and I met this guy named Bill Ewell. And he just looks like a druid, just like he lives in a tree, and he opens up the tree and goes out and everything. And I was like, Bill, what do you do? So I go and I try to study beetles and boletes, and a very particular type of beetle, and they mate in the most crazy way. It's like this beetle will fuse on top of another beetle, and they'll vibrate. And if they make the right harmony, she'll mate with him. Otherwise, they'll kick her off. And you can only make the harmony while you're on a specific type of bolete mushroom. If it's anywhere else, the harmony doesn't. It's like, who the fuck does this? It's like 20 years, 30 years just thinking about goddamn beetles and bolete mushrooms. But that's that community. And they're the happiest people you'll ever meet. And they're just so much fun to talk to. And there's just so much lore there that's not discovered. The other thing is there's a ton of undiscovered mushrooms. So, you go to my ranch up in Wyoming, go out that national forest next to it, you'll probably discover 6 or 7 new species just doing some gene sequencing and things like that. So there's like a gold rush for new things to discover to treat all kinds of things. So love mushrooms, love that community. I think there's a lot of wonderful medicinal properties, and everybody there is just a lot of fun to hang out with. The other passion is aquaponics and hydroponics, and I got a lot more serious after COVID. I go to the supermarket, all the store shelves are barren. And I say, guys, can you imagine if we had a real big thing, what this would be like? We need to have domestic food production. We need to have resilience at the community level. So let's go build a $40-50 million aquaponics facility next to every major city. So at least you have some local production of food and people won't starve to death. Otherwise, it's very bad. And again, the margins are phenomenal there, 20%, 30%, if you actually do it right and alternate your crops properly and so forth. And you create a lot of high-paying jobs with it as well.
And so you kind of draw a lot of value from staying close to nature in all of these kinds of ways to keeping you humble. Like you said, what is it? The goat is still going to crap on you.
Oh, yeah, the donkeys will shit on you, whether you're broke or a billionaire.
That's a good line. That's the like that'll be the line you'll be remembered for,
right?
If the universe has a sense of humor.
It's a neo Yogi Berra.
So I think mushrooms is a good place to ask about my friend Joe Rogan. So I keep folks from the Cardano community keep saying things like Lex podcast first, then Joe Rogan experience. I guess I'm the moon and Joe is Mars in this metaphor. Since I'm a CS person, I can talk a little bit more fluently about cryptocurrency because fundamentally, cryptocurrency is a computational idea. But then there's somebody like Joe, who's more like an everyman, and he does not necessarily know the technical intricacies of cryptocurrencies. What kind of, and I don't think he's had a cryptocurrency person on.
Didn't he interview Andreas Antonopoulos?
Oh, he did. That's right. A long, long time ago. But that was almost like, the cryptocurrency space goes through phases. And I think we're in a new era of some kind.
Right.
And how do you talk to Joe about Cardano? How do you talk to Joe about what the heck? I remember somebody tried to explain to him what Dogecoin is. How do you explain this whole space of what Bitcoin is, of where Ethereum is, of where Cardano and smart contracts and some of this proof of stake ideas that we've been talking about?
You don't. What you do is you start with applications that they're interested in. So he's an elk hunter, and so he's probably interested in elk tags, right? So you start there, and you say that whole system can be put on a blockchain, and here's how it's going to be better for you. You say that's what you do. You always connect it to something they know and love, and then once they get that, they say, "Oh, that's really cool." And then they ask, "What else can you do with it? What else can you sell me on it?" And you kind of work your way outwards there. The problem technologists make is they're so damn in love with the technology. They have that tail wagging the dog where they just want to talk about the technology and how incredibly cool it is. And that's fun. It's like talking about math. Oh, God, let's talk about coordisms. That's fun. All right, yeah. Everybody's eyes glaze over. No, you always have to connect it to the interest of the particular person and what they care about, what they love, what they need. Royalty payments. He's a big guy. He's got the Spotify thing. He's got all these things going on. Intellectual property is probably pretty important to Joe at some juncture. So NFTs. We could talk about this concept of perpetual royalties. So for example, let's say that you create a piece of art. You can build into the token itself a perpetual royalty to something you care about. Maybe every time it sells, it pays it back to you. Or maybe every time it sells, it donates to some clean water charity or something like that. The point is that the actual acquisition of the NFT requires adherence to that smart contract. So people can't deviate from your desire even after you die. So, stuff from Andy Warhol or from Picasso, that can still be generating some donation every time a Picasso sells to something else. You can do that with NFTs. And so he starts thinking, God, what else can I do? I do shows. Maybe I can do my tickets with these types of things. Maybe I can do loyalty points for my fans. So now you got him engaged, and he's thinking of all the opportunities for him, and it gives him an incentive to anchor and connect to those concepts. And then over time, he starts asking questions, well, how do we know it's secure? Then we can talk about proof of work or proof of stake or these types of things. Well, so this is how it stays secure if you're really interested. And there's an incentive to have the attention span necessary to do the homework, eat the broccoli, and get over that hill.
But it's also an opportunity, at least it was for me, especially with Bitcoin a while ago, is to take another look at the monetary system. Mm-hmm. Even look at I've been looking quite a bit at the history of the 20th century and sort of look at that history through the perspective of the monetary system, of the gold standard and all those kinds of things. And just add that little layer of consideration of how money can be used to by people in power to control the populace.
Right.
And it's fascinating to look at the history from that perspective, and then that allows you to look at the future of how we can change that in order to empower people. And then of course the governance thing that you're working on is fascinating because I don't know, but it seems like a deeply broken aspect of our government is just the voting system. And discussing how that could be revolutionized is fascinating, because a lot of conversations end up being on the internet about like number go up, which is like financial side. And to me personally, at least, and I think that's the same for Joe, that's just boring. Like, it's the investing, the financial side of it. I know it has a lot of impact, but it's kind of boring.
Right.
Because long term is not going to have any impact. If the ideas are strong, long term it's going to win.
Right.
If the ideas are weak, long term is going to lose. The ups and downs of the short term don't matter. That's just like casino games that you play. Speaking of games, video games, got to ask you about those.
Okay.
You mentioned Diablo. Maybe you're a fan of Diablo.
Well, yeah, and Diablo 2 was great.
Do you like Skyrim?
Was great. Skyrim was great too. Like the Elder Scrolls. I actually bought the game that the Elder Scrolls was based on. Do you know that? So, way back in the day, the Elder Scrolls series was inspired by a game called Legends of Valor that I played when I was a little kid, and it doesn't actually have an ending. They ran out of money before they finished it, so they just kind of like put this little thing on and said, okay, but you never finish it. So I actually bought all the intellectual property for the game.
I saw that. I didn't know there was a connection between Legends of Valor.
I forget the name. The guy was it Todd something at Bethesda. Mm-hmm. He played it. He was inspired by it, and then he created Arena right after playing it.
That was such a good game. Arena, Daggerfall. Yeah.
I had a copy of Daggerfall when I was a kid, but it had a bug, and so when you left the dungeon, it would crash. And this was before like you could get an easy patch for it. So I never actually played Daggerfall. I entered in through Morrowind.
Yeah, no, the Daggerfall was the fascinating thing. We're just jumping all over, but we'll return to Legends of Valor because I want to ask you about that. But Daggerfall was fascinating because I think of all the Elder Scroll games, it was like the largest because it was like randomly generated.
Right.
It would like randomly generate the worlds, the dungeons and so on, which is fascinating to think about. Like, how big can you make the world, both in actuality and feel? Like, it's incredible to have a video game. I don't know how many video games do this well, where the feeling is you can be lost here forever. You can live here, because most video games have like a bottom. It feels like you can run out of stuff. Where Daggerfall was like, I could just keep doing this.
Right.
At least that's what I felt at the time. But yeah, why? What the heck? Legends of Valor. What's the idea there?
Well, I mean, there's really nothing about it that's super compelling today. I mean, there's a nostalgia of youth that's there, but I mean, it doesn't even have a class system, a level system. The combat system is terrible. There's no journal. The magic system is terrible, and so forth. And so I just wanted to start somewhere, and I felt like that would be an incredibly fun overhaul project. I kind of got the idea from Beamdog Studios when they did another one of my favorite games. Remember Baldur's Gate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they did
I love that. Baldur's Gate 2.
Oh, yeah, the enhanced edition was great. They should have never just done Throne of Ball. They should have done an actual proper sequel and gone down that whole road. But anyway, I got the idea there. I said, well, take some old piece of IP and then you can kind of retrofit it and clean it up. And what's nice about Legends of Valor is it's a blank slate. You can do your own Elder Scrolls. You can create your own class system and level system and so forth. You could write some beautiful, exciting, fun narratives for that. And also, it gives me a chance to explore a lot of things I think should be dragged into game development, like algorithmically generated music is one example. Nice. The problem with sound games is, as you mentioned, you play lots and lots of hours, but your sound content is much smaller. So you have tons of repetition in the soundtrack. So what if you could connect the music to the state of the game world, and it automatically, through some process, will generate music? And there's actually people who study this, and so that's one dimension. The other thing is you have things like GPT-3 and so forth. There was a great game, Event Zero, and it came out like 2016, where you could actually have a dialogue with an AI, and you're like a marooned astronaut on a space station that's abandoned, and you have to somehow work with this AI through communicating with it to convince you to take you home. But the AI is a bit duplicitous, and I don't want to spoil the plot of the game because it's such a cool game, but it's actually like a paint by numbers. It's almost like Zork, where you don't have pre-selected dialogue. You actually type in the terminal and the AI will reply to you back and forth. And this was 2016, and it's like things have gotten an order of magnitude better. So the evolution of that tech, I think within the next 5 years brought into video games, could give you incredibly cool dialogue inside the game. So algorithmically generated music, better dialogue, better gameplay mechanics. Also, I'd love to explore alternative physics systems, alternative geometries like hyperbolic geometry or these types of things. And there's actually Hyperbolica is a game that does that.
Wow.
And you can do down the Euclidean geometry as well and bring those elements into a game design. And that's what we'll do with Legends of Valor. So it'll be kind of like Skyrim, but with a lot of really cool new shit. It's kind of like I saw Aerosmith years ago, and he was out there. He's like, "Do you like the old shit? Do you like the new shit? Kind of middle shit?" So
you're going for the middle.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do some of the old and some of the new, and bring it in. So that'll be a lot of fun. And what's nice about it is that there's a lot of new play in the market because of the Microsoft acquisition of Bethesda. Mm-hmm. They've been losing employees like crazy, and there's a lot of belief that Elder Scrolls 6 will not live up to expectations because Microsoft will kill it.
I will tweet it. Okay, listen to me. I will go into. I'm all about love on the internet, but I will go hard at you, Microsoft, if you screw up Elder Scrolls.
Well, we might have to do a spiritual successor, right? And it might have to happen with Legends of Valor. You never know.
All right.
But it's a passion project, so I have no time for it at all. It's like so low on my list of things to do. So I'll probably do it in 2022, 2023, and we'll build a nice crew, and we'll do it in Wyoming, probably in Wheatland or some really small town, and we'll import everybody, and then we'll have to build the whole city up like Elon is doing here in Texas. It'll be a fun project.
Well, I like programmatically generated music. You mentioned Baldur's Gate.
There's, by the way, Haskell frameworks for that. Euterpe is one.
For generating music?
Yeah,
I wonder how successful that could be, because I remember Baldur's Gate was the first game where I realized music is so important to the game. It was the thing I remembered about the game. It was the reason that it was the thing I thought about when I was away from the game. Is like that the feeling it created, that music. I don't even remember the music anymore, but I remember the music.
Jeremy Soule, I think, was the composer.
Yeah.
And it was great. And actually getting like Raman Djawadi or Bear McCready in to do that, it would be so cool.
Okay, this is awesome. Ridiculous question. What's the, maybe let's say, top 3 greatest video games of all time?
Baldur's Gate is definitely in the top 3. Arcanum is my favorite game. And Arcanum Troika Games was just this amazing studio where they took the time to build probably the most compelling game worlds. In the case of Arcanum, it takes place in kind of like a 19th century Victorian England play, so steampunk. But then there's also magic inside this game world. And there's this crazy juxtaposition between magic and technology. And the more technology you have, magic stops working. The more magic you have, it disrupts technology. So all the people on the magic side hate the technology people and vice versa. And so you're just this character in this game world, and you're just trying to figure out where do you fit. And it has this incredible plot where you're kind of just a stowaway on a Zeppelin that gets shot down, and you get dragged into this conspiracy, and you have to kind of figure out the conspiracy as you go through the whole game world. And you meet all these different races, like the elves and the dwarves and so forth, and they've all been impacted by the proliferation of technology in different ways. Like the humans use steam engines to clear cut all the forest, and it caused a lot of problems. The dwarves leaked that technology to the humans, and so they kind of got exiled for it and so forth. And you have to decide, where do you fit in all this? And you have a lot of choices as a player. You can be on the magic side, the technology side, kind of be neutral. And there's 40 different endings for the game. It's just incredible. And this is all 2000. And then you talk about a procedurally generated world. You have a quick travel, but if you want, you can just walk and the world randomly generates. But it's not like Daggerfall where there was interesting things along the way. So it was really ahead of its time, and it was kind of the last of a generation of games. It was based on the same framework that Interplay used for Fallout, the original Fallout 2. So that was really a cool setup.
So how were the graphics? They were not essential to
it's isometric, top-down. So
cool.
Yeah, kind of like the Fallout look. And so it doesn't hold up super well today, but that was never the point. It was more of a story-driven game. But it was one of the very few games where at the very end of the game, you could actually talk the villain into killing himself instead of fighting you. If you had to really work at it, you had to become a master of persuasion and get your charisma score maxed out and learn all this stuff along the way. And you have this philosophical debate over the nature of life and death with him.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then you're just like, by the way, you're wrong, and here's why. And he's like, oh yeah, you got a point. I'm just going to kill myself. I was like, wow, this is great. Planescape Torment is the other one I think is probably the greatest.
What's it called? Planescape?
Yeah, it's another one on the Infinity engine, which was what was used for Baldur's Gate. So it looks like Baldur's Gate. And God, that was such an incredibly well-written game. You play this character called the Nameless One, and this little blue guy, and you wake up in a morgue, and it turns out that you're immortal, and every time you die, you lose all your memories. And so you've just been apparently living this life for a very long time, and you meet all these people in this crazy city called Sigil who know you, but you don't know yourself, and you're trying to figure out your name, your identity, and why do you have this curse where you live forever, but you keep forgetting every time you get killed? And it turns out you weren't such a nice person throughout this entire game world. But then again, there's this question of, well, if you can start over and you lose all your memories, do you have a chance for redemption or not? So it's an incredible game, Planescape Torment. And it's actually another one of those games where you can never actually have a fight. You can just kind of talk your way out of everything. And there's probably like 1,000 pages of dialogue inside the game. Those guys had a lot of fun and a lot of drugs making that game.
Do you think these three games are the kinds that would still be okay to play today, or are they forever lost in time because we sort of got desensitized to the richness of computer graphics and all those kinds of things in modern games?
I think you can enhance these games because your storytelling medium is so much more engaging. I was at the movie theater before COVID, and the person to the left of me was looking at their cell phone during the movie, and the person to the right of me was looking at their cell phone. They're just not engaged anymore. Everybody is attention starved. And the video game is one of the last mediums where you have undivided attention of people. They're really into it, man. They're all into that thing. And so I think the fact that you have VR and AR and enhanced graphics and all these new gameplay mechanics, it's a value add instead of a value negative. Because ultimately, what are you doing? You're telling stories. And you're trying to connect people to something. Maybe it's the nature of life and death, or are we truly real? Or are we in a simulation or not? Or something like, it'd be great to do 13th Floor as a game or something like that. And the question is, well, how good of a story can you tell? Well, you're constrained by your storytelling tools and technology. The fact that games are so much more advanced now means that you now have many more dimensions of storytelling available to you. And actually with AI now coming in, and really good AI coming in the next 5 or 10 years, your storytelling is not static anymore. The person can actually majorly participate and change the outcome in ways that were previously unpredictable. The other thing is they're still educational. You can teach people concepts that they never knew before. And it's like if you want to teach people about bizarre geometries, or like Minecraft is a great example. A lot of people learned how computers work from Redstone. Think about that. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we said, we're more and more going to be living in video game worlds. Might as well sort of, as opposed to just make it fun, also expand our knowledge, expand our ability to think, explore different ideas, and do education broadly defined within those video game worlds. So we do the entirety of life in the video game worlds. Hopefully it doesn't look like Minecraft, but we'll see. Do you have advice for young people today, aside from playing lots of video games? High schoolers, college students, thinking about their career, thinking about life.
Well, we no longer live in a world where you get one skill set, you do it for 40 years and retire. I mean, that ship has sailed a long time ago. So learn how to learn, and learn an appreciation and love for learning. That's the first thing. Josh Waitzkins wrote this beautiful book, The Art of Learning, if you ever read it. Yeah. Stuff like that. So good study skills, slipbox notes, these things. What was it? Zettelkasten or whatever it is. Yeah, there's a lot of little techniques that you can pick up along the way. And basically they teach you how to process lots of information very quickly, retain it, and then decide what's useful to you for that moment. The second thing is, do not undervalue EQ, emotional intelligence. We've lived for a long time in a society where IQ is dominant. It's like how smart you are excuses everything else. You could be a horrible human being, but he's a really bright guy, right? The asshole mathematician or physicist. We now live in a world where the balance is far more important. You have to be smart, but you also have to be a nice guy. And don't undervalue that. So learn things like closed circuit communication and active listening. These skill sets will always pay enormous dividends along the way. Third, remember that you're judged for the things that you have and what you do with those things. If you have very little, you still have to do something. When you have a lot, you have to do even more. So learn how to give, and do that early on. Learn how to give back. Volunteerism, charity, mentoring, these types of things. Those are so incredibly valuable to a person's development. The people that you mentored in the academic world, you learn this. You have graduate students. They one day will be professors. And it might just so happen they might eclipse you. Remember, Gauss had a doctoral advisor. Never forget that. And so did Feynman. Make sure that you mentor people, you give back, and you learn how to learn, and you learn how to teach. Super important for your development as a person. Now, you'll notice all those things are agnostic to whatever domain you happen to have chosen. You could be in medicine or law or technology, whatever. That's your fancy, whatever your passion happens to be. And don't conflate your earning and your career. If people try to keep putting these things together, they're increasingly becoming decoupled. There's a lot of cases where people do their passions and they do it for free or, for sustenance, but then they have something else they do on the side to also augment or supplement their income. Probably best that way. When you conflate the two, you tend to get burnt out terribly. You see this a lot with musicians or other people. They want to make music, but they have to tour or whatever because they got to pay bills. Stuff like that happens. Other than that, I'm not a guru. I'm not in any particular position to...
You showed up in a robe, which I thought was kind of weird. And you had a crown, and you kept calling yourself king.
King of the rats. And that wasn't a robe. That was a yukata.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Wait, audience, he's joking. Reddit.
I heard somebody's going to write blog posts. Charles Hoskinson walks around with a crown. Let me ask you a ridiculously big and the most important question. What's the meaning of this whole thing, of life?
Well, I got a story for that.
Does this have something to do with a farm?
Well, no. It's from Japan. I used to live in Japan. I live in Osaka, next to Namba. Beautiful area. It's like, if you're going to live anywhere in Japan, live in Osaka. You live anywhere in Osaka, live next to the restaurant district. At 4 o'clock in the morning, you can get good ramen. These are the things in life that make you who you are. So there was a shogun, and he was kind of a badass. He was really good at killing people, really good at running his empire. And then he got a bit disgruntled in his late 40s. And he said, I'm just going to give it all to my son, and I'm going to wander around Japan until I find the perfect cherry blossom. That's what I'm going to do. Everybody thought he went crazy. He said, no, that's what I'm going to do. And he took his whole entourage with him, and so his son is now the shogun. And then he's just wandering throughout Japan and having all these incredible, crazy adventures as he's wandering throughout Japan. Fighting bandits and loving beautiful women and so forth. And then 30 years later, he's passing these 2 geisha gals, and one of them turns around and they notice him slumped over next to a cherry tree. And so she goes over to try to rouse him, and he's dead. And in his hands is a wilted cherry blossom. That's a very Japanese story, right? The point is that it's not the actual blossom finding the perfection that matters. It's the things you do on a day-to-day basis, the places you go, the people you meet, the experiences you have, and the joy you take in the things that you do here in the moment now. You have to get there. If you look at Jiro Dreams of Sushi, there's this guy, 70 years of his life, making the same damn piece of sushi again and again and again. He's the happiest guy around. Albert Camus and his story of Sisyphus. Sisyphus should be miserable. It's the Greek curse. No, he's happy. He has total clarity of purpose. And every day he gets to basically roll that stone just a little bit better than the day before, a different way than the day before. And it's not the destination. It isn't getting the stone up at the top of the hill that matters. It's the fact that the act, you find that joy in that act, that ikigai, that way of life, that purpose of life. That, I think, is the closest thing a human can get to a meaning. You're a blip. You didn't exist. You're dead. And if you compare it to the size of the universe in that time, it's just a little blip. So all you can do with what you have is just find meaning in the things that you do on a daily basis. And you can't predict the macro. We have all this wealth and power in America. What if a world war breaks out? We could be destitute like war-marked Germany. And so, you could be a big guy. You could be now living on the street side. Would you be miserable? The point of life is getting to a point that no matter what comes your way, what misfortune comes your way, you're in a position where you can find a modicum of happiness and love and empathy for others in that moment. And then the highest pursuit of life is the ability to share that mindset with other people and give it to them somehow. And that's really hard, because everybody comes to you, they're always Eeyore, doom and gloom and cynical, but this and that, a reputation this and that. You have to somehow transcend all of it and say, that doesn't matter. Look at the cherry blossoms. Aren't they beautiful today? And let's find a better one tomorrow.
See, you're also a fan of fishing, I read somewhere.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite books is Old Man and the Sea, where there's an old man sort of battling a big fish and basically closing out the last chapter of his life in this battle. So I think another aspect of life with this boulder, it feels like the boulder gets bigger and bigger as we get closer to death. And, you find yourself married to a particular struggle in life that eventually just kind of overtakes the entirety of meaning of your existence. Do you think, I know what it is for me, do you have something like that? The broader vision that unites your work with Cardano and everything you've done in life, the big fish that you're going to end up in the dark of night struggling with at the end, the last chapter of your life, like the big problem you're taking on?
Well, in mathematics, it was the Goldbach conjecture. I'd like to prove that. That's probably not.
That's a really big fish. So do you still have a love for mathematics?
Oh God, yeah, of course I do. You never lose that. You never lose it. You lose the ability to do deep work, and you don't have the creativity and the raw inspiration. This is why I've gotten into automated theorem proving, because what I lack because I'm getting older, I can now have computers understand it and use AI to just solve this stuff. It's like the cheat codes for math, So fuck those guys. We'll still do that. But the mathematics still has those last passions, and there's all kinds of cool things that I'd like to see done. Like quota complexes allow you to unify topology and number theory in really novel ways. And there are all kinds of cool things, but who cares? It's everybody has those white whales. Another thing I'd love to do is bring back the woolly mammoth. That's George Church's hidden pleasure. In 5 to 10 years, it's actually going to happen. And I have this beautiful ranch in Wyoming, and I got to find a way to convince George to let me raise his clone mammoths on my ranch. Among the bison. They'd probably get along really well. And then I have to learn all these cool things about woolly mammoths, like, do you shave them in the summertime and let them get shaggy during the winter, or do you just let that coat go and then falls? Who knows? It's an undiscovered country.
I just had the image of Charles Hoskinson alone on a bison farm trying to raise a woolly mammoth, and
just start wearing a white suit and say "Welcome to Hoskinson Ranch." I'll have a cane with amber on it.
Yeah. With a chalkboard that you keep scrambling on, like the Beautiful Mind, the movie, and you'll have voices.
Oh, the schizophrenia has already come. You guys are all figments of my imagination, anyway. Now, one of my goals, though, I love catfish, and they live a long time. They get really damn big. If you see those guys, I'd love to catch one now and be in my 60s and catch the same fish twice. And recognize it. Maybe I'll lift a scar or something. That'd be really cool. Going back to the fish thing,
Yeah.
Because both the fish has gone through a lot, I've gone through a lot. And we can just be like old
reminisce.
Friends. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then
I'll die of a heart attack, and my mammoths will eat me.
That's something to look forward to. Charles, this was one of the most amazing conversations I've ever had. It's truly an honor that you would spend your valuable time with me. And I'm glad you exist in the cryptocurrency and the technology space. And I can see your love for mathematics and your love for life just radiate through everything you do. So thank you for being you. And thank you for talking to me today.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Lex.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Charles Hoskinson. And thank you to Gala Games, Allform, Indeed, ExpressVPN, and 8th Sleep. Check them out in the description to support this podcast. And now, let me leave you with some words from William Faulkner. You cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.
Lightning! Foresight! Got it! Right here! Blazing in! Yes, let me... Right here! Blazing right here! Blazing in! Yes, let me out! All yours! Right here! Prominent revolt! You're done. Let me out! Lightning! Once again! Right here! Goes on it! Blazing in! Prominent revolt! Right here! Goes on it! Got Let me out! Blazing in! Once again. Right here. Blazing in. Oh, you got it. So long. Blazing in. Flash Blazing in! Blazing in! All yours! You're done! All yours! Right here! Blazing in! Blade over! Blade Nova! This! Power the Aegis! Ray of punishment! Foresight! Ray of punishment! Right, got it!
Smash!
Yeah, so for some reason Like, I think I've fought that player's Jigglypuff before in Zelda versus Jigglypuff, and they were really close matches. So that means that player's really good. But I guess judging by the GSP, I feel like I've put a lot more time into Mithra than Kelly has, and so I feel like if I drop games, especially if I'm dropping games to like heavy Pyrus side B usage or something, it just starts to feel really troll. So I just got kind of depressed for a second. Also, my internet is intermittently acting up, and I don't know what the fuck is going on. I think that it might... Like, all I want to do really is stream, probably, but I'm sort of turned off on Smash all of a sudden. I did play pretty well today, but I feel like I got suddenly insanely depressed when I was, like, dropping games. So that was bad. Shit, though. I don't really know what to do. I might need to just end the stream and start a new stream or change something. No, wait, where do I check that? I saw you mention something about that, but I haven't, I don't know where that is. Well, I mean, I literally saw the bitrate drop a lot. View. Okay. Yeah, there were 13,000 dropped frames. Frames missed due to rendering lag, 3. Skipped frames due to encoding lag, 0. No, I think it's just an internet drop frames, like internet problem. Smash was perfectly smooth, so that was kind of weird, but like the stream itself started acting up. I don't know what to do. I think I need a moment to like... Kinda wanna try doing something else. I don't know what though. I don't know, it's okay to have a few bad rounds of Smash where you feel kind of bad about it. I guess that's fine. It's just my upload speed, I actually haven't run a speed test in a while, but I should look that up actually. I don't know if speed test is accurate if I'm currently streaming while running it, so I don't know if I should do it later. Yeah, I actually probably will do weed. I'll probably start the stream over. Maybe. I think I kind of want to end this stream and then start a new stream where I'm not listening to a podcast. And then I can run a speed test in between or something. And then I'll try to figure out something else to do, I think. Like that was like an hour and a half of Smash. That wasn't bad. I don't know. Obviously I need to work on my like fucking... First of all, get better at fighting Pyra still. Secondly, get a better attitude. Because I think I had a bad attitude in the last like 30 minutes or something. Anyway, I'll be back later. Like sooner than you think probably.